Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, we have something truly special lined up, a conversation I believe will change the way you think about habits, growth, and personal success. We're diving deep into a topic that affects every single one of us, no matter who you are or where you're from. Today, we're talking about the power of positive habits, and who better to join us in this discussion than the man himself, a legend in personal development, someone who's inspired millions, Mr. Jim Rohn. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with everyone listening. I'm truly grateful for this chance to share some ideas, thoughts, and hopefully a bit of wisdom that I've picked up over the years. Habits are a powerful thing. They shape our lives, our successes, and even our struggles. And the beauty of it is that each of us has the power to decide which habits we'll adopt. So today, I hope to inspire some positive shifts and share practical tools that people can start using right away.
Jim, we are so excited to have you here. For our listeners, I don't think I need to introduce Jim Rohn, but for anyone tuning in for the first time, let me tell you, Jim is one of the most respected names in the world of personal development. His teachings on life principles, discipline, and especially the role of habits have inspired not just individuals, but entire generations. Jim, you've built a legacy helping people understand that real success is the result of small, intentional actions repeated over time.
Absolutely, Matt. And thank you for that kind introduction. I've always believed that success is simply a few disciplines practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment repeated every day. It's really that simple, but it's not easy. Habits, whether they're good or bad, define us. They shape our outcomes, and they dictate the direction of our lives. And the incredible thing is that we get to choose which habits we adopt. Today, I want to explore that choice and help people understand that building positive habits is really within reach for anyone.
Beautifully put, Jim. And that's really the heart of today's conversation, understanding what positive habits are, why they matter so much, and how we can all start building them into our daily lives, whether it's health, relationships, financial success, or personal growth. It all comes down to the actions we take consistently, right? I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed by change because they believe it has to be this monumental all or nothing effort. But positive habits, as you've often said, are about those small manageable steps that add up over time.
Exactly, Matt. And that's one of the biggest myths I'd like to dispel right off the bat. People often think that to make a real change, they need to take giant leaps. But in reality, it's about small steps, one at a time, repeated consistently. You don't need to overhaul your life all at once. Just start with one habit, one small discipline that you commit to every day. Over time, those little actions accumulate, and they lead to something truly powerful.
I love that, Jim. It's such an encouraging message because it means change is accessible for everyone right now without the pressure to do it all at once. But I want to touch on something else here. You're known for saying, we all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Can you talk a little about how that idea connects with today's topic on habits?
Of course, Matt. You see, habits are a choice, and with every choice, there's a consequence. Choosing to create positive habits involves a bit of discomfort, a bit of discipline. But choosing not to create those habits, or choosing habits that don't serve us, leads to something much harder to bear: the pain of regret. Discipline weighs ounces, while regret weighs tons. The good news, though, is that when we invest in the right habits, when we commit to even just a little bit of daily discipline, we're choosing a path that leads to fulfillment, progress, and ultimately joy.
That's incredibly powerful, Jim. And it's one of the main reasons I wanted you to come on the show. Positive habits are the foundation of everything we're trying to achieve, and I think our listeners will benefit so much from learning not just why these habits are important, but also how to get started. What can we do today that our future selves will thank us for? How can we overcome the inertia of old habits and start building the habits that align with our goals and dreams?
Great questions, Matt. And that's exactly what we'll be covering. Today, I'll share a framework, some practical steps, and even a few stories from my own life and those of people I've met over the years. Each of us has a unique journey, but the principles for building positive habits are universal. So I hope that today's conversation will leave everyone feeling empowered, encouraged, and equipped to start taking those small, meaningful steps toward the life they want.
That's exactly the kind of inspiration and guidance we need, Jim. So for all of you listening, get ready to dive into an exploration of the habits that can truly transform your life. Grab a pen and paper if you want to take notes, because today is going to be packed with valuable insights and actionable advice. Let's get ready to break down the barriers to building a life of discipline, purpose, and growth. I'm thrilled to get into this discussion, and Jim, I can't wait to hear everything you have to share with us today.
Thank you, Matt. I'm looking forward to it as well. Let's get started, shall we?
All right, folks, let's dive into this. This is the power of positive habits with Jim Rohn. Let's go. All right, Jim, let's get to the heart of our discussion. We've talked about why we're here today to understand positive habits and the role they play in achieving success. But before we dive into how we build them, I think it's essential to understand what positive habits are and why they matter so much. Jim, could you start by giving us your definition of a habit and, more importantly, why we should care about cultivating the right ones?
Absolutely, Matt. That's a great starting point. You see, a habit, in the simplest terms, is something you do consistently in action, a thought pattern, or a behavior that becomes part of your routine. Habits shape who we are because they're the actions we take regularly, whether we realize it or not. And the interesting thing about habits is that they're like a double-edged sword. They can work for us, moving us closer to our goals and the life we want, or they can work against us, keeping us stuck, or even moving us backward. That's why I believe that choosing our habits carefully is one of the most powerful choices we can make.
I love that. So, Jim, when you talk about habits as choices, it sounds like you're saying they aren't just things that happen to us. Habits aren't accidental, they're intentional. Is that right?
Exactly, Matt. That's the key right there. Habits are a matter of design. Now, that's not to say we don't pick up habits unconsciously. Many of the habits we have today, good or bad, were formed by repeated actions over time. But the empowering thing is that we can choose which habits we want to keep, which ones we want to get rid of, and which new ones we want to develop. I always say that success is the result of a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is the result of a few errors in judgment repeated every day.
So when you talk about positive habits, you're talking about those simple disciplines, the ones that lead to success over time. Can you expand on that idea, Jim? How can a small habit, something that might seem insignificant today, lead to big results down the line?
Of course, Matt. You know, one of my favorite principles is the idea of compounding. When you think about financial investments, for instance, we understand the power of compounding interest, how small contributions over time can grow into something significant. Well, habits work the same way. A small positive action, let's say reading for 10 minutes a day or setting aside a small amount of your income, might seem trivial at first. But over time, the impact of that daily action compounds. 10 minutes of reading every day becomes 650 minutes a year. That's hours of self-improvement. A small financial habit becomes a nest egg. The small actions we take each day, the positive habits we build, they compound into big results.
That's such a powerful way to think about it. It means that anyone, no matter where they are right now, has the power to start building a better future with just a few small actions each day. But Jim, for some people, the word habit might sound like a chore, like something restrictive. How do you view habits personally? And how do you keep yourself excited about maintaining them?
Great question, Matt, and that's an important one. See, habits aren't meant to restrict us, they're actually meant to liberate us. They free us from making 1,000 little decisions each day because a habit puts that action on autopilot. Once a habit is established, it takes less effort, less willpower. So think of habits as a way to conserve your energy and willpower for the things that matter most. And as for staying motivated, well, that's where having a clear purpose and goal comes in. If you know why you're building a particular habit, say, exercising each morning for your health, reading daily for your mind, or saving money for your future, then the habit itself becomes a means to a much greater end.
That's a great perspective, Jim. So it sounds like when you're clear on your reasons, it becomes easier to stick with the habit because you're focusing on the benefits. Can you talk a little more about how you personally approach choosing habits? What criteria do you use to decide whether a habit is worth investing in?
Absolutely, Matt. I approach habits by looking at what I want to accomplish in my life. I ask myself a few important questions. First, I think, is this habit going to serve me long term? Will it lead me closer to my goals? Or will it take me further away from them, for example? Habits like regular exercise, reading, financial management, or even expressing gratitude, all these habits build a foundation for a healthy, prosperous, and fulfilling life. If a habit doesn't align with those values and goals, then I know it's not worth pursuing. And secondly, I consider the impact of not having that habit. Let's say someone doesn't have the habit of saving. Over time, the impact of not saving, of not building that financial discipline, can lead to hardship, stress, and a lack of options in the future. So I weigh the cost of not establishing a positive habit, just as much as I consider the benefits.
That's so insightful, Jim. I think a lot of people don't think about the cost of not building certain habits. It's like if we're not growing, we're probably sliding backward, right?
Exactly, Matt. We can't stay in one place. We're either moving forward or we're falling behind. And that's why it's so important to choose positive habits that move us forward, even if it's just a little bit every day. Every step, no matter how small, is progress.
That's inspiring, Jim. It really gives hope and practical guidance to everyone listening that small steps, small positive habits are the foundation of major change. Now, before we move on to the next part, I'd love it if you could share an example of a habit that transformed your life. Maybe something from your early years that set you on this path of success and growth.
Absolutely, Matt. One of the most impactful habits I developed early on was the habit of reading. And it didn't happen overnight, it was a gradual process. When I was young, I didn't see the value in reading. But one of my early mentors taught me that to become more valuable to the marketplace, I had to become more valuable to myself. So I began reading books on personal development, on finance, on relationships, on business. And little by little, those ideas, those insights started changing the way I thought, the way I made decisions. Reading became a daily discipline for me, and over time it compounded. The knowledge I gained shaped my mindset, my skills, and ultimately my life.
That's incredible, Jim. It's amazing how something as simple as reading can have such a massive impact over time. And I think that's such a relatable example because, like you said, it's a small step anyone can start today. Thank you for sharing that story. It really shows how powerful positive habits can be when we give them time to grow.
My pleasure, Matt. And I think that's the takeaway here for anyone listening. If you're wondering where to start, just pick one habit, one small thing that will make you better, and commit to it. Over time, you'll see the difference.
Well, Jim, I think you've laid out an excellent foundation for us to move forward. So folks, keep that in mind as we dive deeper. Positive habits may start small, but their impact is profound. Let's keep going and explore exactly how we can start building and sustaining these habits. Jim, you ready to dive in? Dive.
I'm ready, Matt. Let's get into the practical steps.
All right, Jim, I think everyone listening is now intrigued by the idea of positive habits, but I'd like to dive a little deeper into the why. Why do you believe that positive habits are essential for success? I think a lot of us understand that habits can help us. But the connection between these small daily actions and real success might not be obvious to everyone. Can you shed some light on that for us?
Absolutely, Matt. And I think you've hit on something important. For many people, the concept of habits can feel abstract. It's something they know they should do. But they don't fully grasp how habits are the building blocks of success. I often say that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment repeated daily. It's the small things repeated consistently over time that determine our outcomes in life.
That's such a powerful way to frame it. But Jim, can you tell us a little about your own journey? Maybe something from your early days that showed you firsthand how crucial habits really are for success.
Of course, Matt. When I was young, I didn't have a clear understanding of success. I was working hard, but I was going nowhere. Then, at 25, I met a man named Earl Schoff, who became my mentor. He taught me that my results in life were directly tied to my daily habits. My simple disciplines, he told me something I'll never forget: success is not something you pursue, it's something you attract by the person you become. And what I discovered was that habits were the key to becoming that person. Before then, I thought success was something you stumbled upon, something that happened to lucky people. But Earl showed me that success is a byproduct of small, consistent actions, habits that align with our goals and values.
Wow, that must have been a game-changing realization for you. So how did you start putting that wisdom into practice? I imagine it wasn't easy to suddenly turn everything around at once.
No, it wasn't easy, Matt. And that's the beauty of it. Success is a process. I began with small steps. Earl suggested simple things like reading 10 pages of a good book every day. Now, 10 pages might not seem like much, but in a year, that's 3,650 pages, or roughly a dozen books. He taught me that if I made this a habit, over time I'd have a mind filled with valuable ideas. I began saving a small portion of my income. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That small financial discipline turned into a larger one as I began to understand the power of saving and investing.
So what you're saying is that these small actions became the foundation for larger achievements.
Exactly, Matt. You see, positive habits act like bricks in a wall. Each time we take a small, positive action, we're laying a brick. Day after day, these bricks add up, and before we know it, we've built something substantial. But if we're not intentional with these bricks, if we're not careful about the habits we're forming, then we might end up building a wall we didn't want. That's why I often say we must all suffer one of two pains. the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Discipline is the choice to build positive habits, to be intentional with our actions, while regret comes from neglect, from failing to establish those habits.
That's such a vivid image, Jim. I think everyone listening can relate to that idea of building something brick by brick. But how do we know which habits are worth cultivating? There are so many things people say are important: working hard, being disciplined, staying motivated. How do we know which habits are truly essential?
Well, Matt, I think it's important to start with a vision. Where do you want to go? What kind of life do you want to create? Once you have a vision, you can identify the habits that support that vision. Success, in my opinion, isn't about achieving a single goal. It's about building a lifestyle. So if you want to be successful, look at the daily actions that will take you in that direction. For example, if you want to be financially successful, develop the habit of managing your money. If you want a healthy life, cultivate the habit of eating right and exercising regularly. If you want to be knowledgeable, make reading and learning daily habits. Each of these habits might seem small on its own, but when combined and practiced consistently, they lead to success in those areas.
So it sounds like clarity of vision is key. Once you know what you're aiming for, it becomes easier to see which habits align with that vision.
Absolutely, Matt. Clarity is power. Without a clear vision, we're just going through the motions. But once we know what we want, we can become intentional. We stop letting life happen to us, and we start creating our lives through our choices and actions. And the beauty of it is that once we develop these positive habits, they start to work for us automatically. They become part of who we are.
That's amazing, Jim. I think some people might feel that they're too busy or overwhelmed to start building positive habits. They might think they don't have the time or energy. What would you say to someone who feels that way?
I would say this: you're going to have to pay a price either way. There's a price for neglect, and there's a price for discipline. Neglect leads to regret, while discipline leads to rewards. And the wonderful thing about positive habits is that once they're established, they require less and less energy. Think of it like pushing a boulder. At first it takes effort to get it moving, but once it's in motion, momentum takes over. That's how habits work. The initial investment of time and energy pays off over the long run. And remember, it doesn't take massive action all at once. Start small. Start with one positive habit, even if it's just reading a few pages a day or saving a small portion of your income. Those small actions, done consistently, create the momentum that leads to greater success.
That's really reassuring, Jim. It's easy to feel like we need to make big changes all at once, but what you're saying is that even small changes, when they're positive and consistent, can lead to great success.
That's exactly right, Matt. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. It's not about making huge changes overnight. It's about the steady accumulation of positive actions. And the beautiful thing is, once you start building positive habits, they create a ripple effect. One good habit often leads to another, and then another. When I started reading, for example, it naturally led me to the habit of reflecting on what I'd read, which led me to the habit of journaling, and so on. Each habit enhances the others.
So positive habits reinforce each other. That's such an inspiring idea. And Jim, what would you say to someone who feels like they've already made a lot of mistakes or developed bad habits over time? Can they still turn things around?
Absolutely, Matt. It's never too late to turn things around. The first step is awareness. Recognize the habits that are holding you back and make a commitment to change. And remember, change doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen with consistency. I often say, don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. And you can get better one habit at a time. Every day is a new opportunity to build habits that support your goals and dreams.
Thank you, Jim. I think you've given everyone listening so much hope and practical wisdom. Habits aren't just actions, they're the path to the life we want to build. You've shown us that it's within our reach one day, one habit at a time. Any final thoughts on why habits are so essential to success before we move on?
My pleasure, Matt. If I could leave everyone with one thought, it would be this: success is found in your daily routine. The habits we choose shape our lives, and every day is an opportunity to get a little better, to make progress, and to move closer to our dreams. Small, positive habits lead to big results, and every step, no matter how small, is progress.
Beautifully said, Jim. All right, everyone, take Jim's words to heart. Let's all work on building those positive habits brick by brick and see where they can take us. All right, Jim, we've covered a lot about the why of positive habits, and I think our audience is on board. But now, let's get into the how. For those listening who want to start building better habits today, how do they go about it? What are the actionable steps for creating and sustaining positive habits?
That's a great question, Matt. And I believe that habits, like anything in life, benefit from a structured approach. Many people want to change their habits, but without a framework. It's easy to get lost or to lose motivation. So I've developed a framework over the years, one that involves setting small goals, being consistent, tracking progress, and understanding the impact of our environment and associations. Let's break it down.
That sounds incredible, Jim. I think everyone could use a guide like that in their lives. Let's start with the first part of the framework, setting small goals. Can you explain why this is so important?
Of course, Matt. Setting small goals is absolutely foundational because big changes don't happen overnight. Many people want to jump straight to the final result, but the journey to success is made up of small, manageable steps. When we set a goal that's achievable in the short term, we're giving ourselves something to aim for that doesn't feel overwhelming. This initial win, no matter how small, builds confidence. It's the first brick in the wall we talked about. For example, let's say someone wants to develop the habit of reading. Rather than setting a goal to read an entire book in a week, they might start by reading just 5 pages a day. It's small, but it's achievable, and it builds a foundation. Once this becomes consistent, they can gradually increase the goal. The key here is momentum, and it's hard to build momentum when you're trying to tackle a mountain in one leap.
That makes a lot of sense, Jim. Small goals feel much less intimidating and they create a sense of progress, but I imagine consistency is where a lot of people struggle. Could you talk a bit about the role of consistency in building habits?
Absolutely, Matt. Consistency is what turns actions into habits. Without it, any progress we make is fleeting. Consistency, quite simply, is the glue that holds habits together. It's not just about what we do, but about how often we do it. You see, every time we repeat a behavior, it becomes a little easier, a little more natural. Our brains are wired to form neural pathways with repeated actions, which is why brushing your teeth feels so automatic you don't think about it anymore. That's the power of consistency. The more we perform an action, the more deeply it becomes embedded in our mind. A trick I like to share is the one-day rule. It's simple. Once you start a new habit, never go more than 1 day without doing it. If you miss a day, that's okay, but pick it back up the next day. This one rule helps prevent a lapse from turning into a complete stop. And remember, consistency is not about perfection. Even if you have a day where you can only read 1 page or take a 5-minute walk, doing something, however small, keeps the habit alive.
That's so practical, Jim. The one-day rule sounds like it would be a game changer for anyone trying to build new habits. Now let's move on to the third part of your framework, tracking progress. Why is this important, and how can people go about it effectively?
Great question, Matt. Tracking progress is powerful because it provides feedback. It allows us to see our journey, to look back and say, here's how far I've come. When we track our progress, we're not just relying on memory or vague feelings. We have concrete evidence of our growth, and that fuels our motivation. Imagine you're developing the habit of saving money. If you set aside a small amount each week and track it, you'll start to see the total add up. Over time, you'll feel encouraged to save even more because you can see the results of your efforts. Progress becomes visible and real. One of my favorite ways to track progress is with a simple journal. Write down what you accomplished each day toward your habit. It doesn't need to be fancy, just a line or two about what you did. If you're consistent, you'll start to see patterns, and over time, you'll develop pride in sticking with your commitment.
I love that idea, Jim. A journal seems like a great way to stay engaged with the process and not lose sight of the big picture. Now, the fourth part of your framework is the power of environment and association. Can you explain how that influences habit building?
Yes, Matt, this part is often underestimated, but it's crucial. Our environment and the people we surround ourselves with have a profound effect on our habits. It's like planting a seed. If you plant it in good soil, it'll grow strong. But if the soil is poor, the seed will struggle, no matter how much care you give it. The same goes for habits. Our environment shapes our actions in ways we may not even realize. If we want to eat healthier, for example, it's much easier when our kitchen is stocked with healthy foods and we don't keep tempting snacks around. The environment either supports or undermines our goals.
That's so true, Jim. I've noticed that in my own life. When I surround myself with people who are focused and motivated, I feel more driven too. But what if someone feels like they're in an unsupportive environment? How can they still build positive habits?
That's a great question, Matt. It's true that not everyone has the ideal environment or people around them, but we can make small adjustments. Start by creating a habit-friendly space in your own life. even if it's just one area. If you're trying to develop a reading habit, create a cozy corner where you can read without distractions. Put your book there, set up a comfortable chair, make it inviting. And as for associations, if you can't change who you're around, consider adding new influences. Listen to inspiring podcasts, read books by people who embody the habits you want to build, or join an online group that aligns with your goals. These associations will gradually shift your mindset and help you stay focused, even if your immediate environment isn't ideal.
That's such practical advice, Jim. I think it's empowering to know that even if our environment isn't perfect, we can take steps to shape it in ways that support our goals. So if we put this whole framework together, starting with small goals, staying consistent, tracking our progress, and shaping our environment and associations, do you think anyone can build positive habits?
Yes, Matt, I do. Anyone can build positive habits if they follow these principles. The beauty of it is that you don't need to make drastic changes all at once. Start small, take it one day at a time, and stay consistent. Track your journey and don't underestimate the power of your surroundings. And remember, building positive habits is like planting a tree. It takes time, care, and patience, but the results are lasting. One day you'll look back and realize that these small actions, these simple daily disciplines, have transformed your life in ways you never could have imagined.
Jim, this framework is amazing. It's practical, it's doable, and I think it's exactly what our listeners need to get started on their own journey toward building positive habits. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. I know I'm inspired, and I'm sure everyone listening is too.
My pleasure, Matt. I'm always grateful to share these ideas, and I hope they help people see that success isn't about grand gestures or huge changes overnight. It's about the small things we do each day, the habits we build, and the life we create from them. Start today, start small, and let the power of positive habits take you where you want to go.
Jim, we've covered the framework for building positive habits, and it's clear that anyone can follow these steps to create a better life. But let's be honest, no matter how motivated we are, setbacks are part of the process. People get off track, life happens. And it can be discouraging. What advice do you have for our listeners who are struggling with challenges or setbacks as they work on their positive habits?
Matt, I'm so glad you brought that up. Because the truth is, setbacks are not just possible, they're inevitable. It's part of the human experience. Life is filled with unexpected events, distractions, and moments when our motivation wanes. So, we need a strategy for dealing with these setbacks just as much as we need a plan for building positive habits. The first thing to remember is that setbacks don't mean failure. Let me repeat that setbacks are not failures. They're simply part of the journey. In fact, setbacks can often teach us more about ourselves and our habits than smooth sailing ever could. When we face a challenge, we get the opportunity to examine what went wrong, adjust our approach, and come back even stronger.
That's a powerful point, Jim. I think a lot of people give up on their habits at the first sign of struggle because they think they've failed. What would you say is the first step someone should take when they face a setback?
Great question, Matt. The first step, and perhaps the most important, is to have the right mindset about setbacks. When we view them as opportunities for learning, they become far less intimidating. Instead of thinking, oh no, I've fallen off track, we can think, what can I learn from this experience? For example, let's say someone is trying to build the habit of exercising daily, but after a few weeks they miss a day, then another, and pretty soon they feel like they've completely fallen off track. It's easy to spiral into self-doubt, but what if they viewed this experience as feedback? Maybe they're trying to exercise at a time of day that doesn't fit their schedule, or maybe they set too high of a goal right out of the gate. This isn't failure, it's valuable information. So the first step is to adopt a mindset that sees setbacks as a learning process.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. So once someone has the right mindset, what practical steps can they take to get back on track?
Once you've shifted your mindset, the next step is to have a reset strategy. Think of it like hitting a reset button on your habit. Now, this doesn't mean starting over from scratch, but simply taking a moment to reassess and recommit. One of my favorite reset strategies is something I call the one small action rule. When we're feeling defeated or overwhelmed, taking one small action can help rebuild our confidence. Let's say someone's goal is to write every day, but they haven't written for a week. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the idea of writing a full page or an entire chapter, they can start by writing one sentence, just one. The power of this small action is that it reduces the mental barrier and gives us that little win we need to get back in the game.
The one small action rule, that's brilliant, Jim. It sounds like a great way to get past that initial resistance when you're feeling discouraged. Are there other practical steps people can take to overcome setbacks?
Yes, another powerful approach is revisiting your why. Motivation naturally fades over time. But if we stay connected to the deeper reason behind our habits, it can help us stay on course, especially during tough times. For example, if someone's habit is to eat healthier, they need to remind themselves why they started in the first place. Is it to feel more energized? To be healthier for their family? When they reconnect with that core motivation, it reignites their purpose, and suddenly the effort feels worthwhile again. And it's not just about knowing your why once, it's about revisiting it regularly. Write it down. Post it somewhere you'll see it every day. Because when the going gets tough, your why will remind you of what's truly important.
That's such good advice, Jim. I think people often lose sight of their deeper motivations, especially when life gets busy. But what about when someone has tried everything, they've set small goals, they've been consistent, but they're still struggling with the same setback over and over? What then?
Well, Matt, that's when it's time to do an honest evaluation. Sometimes when we face repeated setbacks, it's a signal that there's something deeper going on. And this is where it helps to get specific and identify the root causes of our challenges. Take a look at the habit you're trying to build and ask yourself questions like, is this habit realistic for my current lifestyle, or am I setting myself up for success? Or am I trying to do too much too soon? It might be that the goal needs adjusting. Or maybe it's time to break it down into even smaller steps. Another powerful tool here is what I call habit stacking. If you're struggling to establish a new habit on its own, try attaching it to an existing habit. For example, if you want to build the habit of reading every day, attach it to something you already do, like having your morning coffee. Stack the habit so it becomes part of your routine, and it'll feel more natural over time.
Habit stacking, that's a fantastic idea, Jim. I can see how linking a new habit to something that's already part of your routine could make it much easier to stick with. Are there other obstacles or challenges that people commonly face when building habits?
Absolutely, Matt. One of the biggest obstacles people face is negative self-talk. When we encounter setbacks, that inner critic can become loud, filling our minds with thoughts like, I can't do this, or I'm just not disciplined enough. This self-doubt can be paralyzing if we let it run the show. One of the most powerful ways to counter this is by practicing what I call positive reinforcement. When you take even a small step toward your habit, celebrate it. Give yourself credit, no matter how small the accomplishment seems. This creates a positive association with your efforts and builds confidence over time. For example, if someone is trying to establish a morning exercise habit and manages to get out of bed just 5 minutes earlier, that's worth celebrating. It might seem minor, but it's a victory. We need to be our own biggest supporters because ultimately our habits are built from the inside out. If we don't believe we can do it, no framework or strategy will make a difference.
Jim, I think that's something a lot of people need to hear. So many of us are hard on ourselves, especially when things don't go as planned. But reinforcing even the small victories, that sounds like it could make a real difference in maintaining motivation. Do you have any other final advice for handling setbacks?
Yes, one last piece of advice, Matt, and it's perhaps the most important of all: be patient with yourself. Building habits is a journey. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a life of positive habits. Setbacks are a part of growth, and they don't define us unless we allow them to. There's a quote I love that says, success is steady progress toward one's goals. Notice it says steady progress, not perfect progress. Every day you make even a tiny bit of progress, you're succeeding. When we're patient and we keep showing up, setbacks lose their power. We learn from them, we adjust, and we keep moving forward. Over time, this persistence is what builds character, resilience, and true success.
Jim, that's such a powerful message to end on: steady progress, not perfect progress. I think it's something we can all take to heart, especially when we're feeling discouraged. Thank you for breaking down these challenges and offering so many practical solutions. It's comforting to know that even setbacks are part of the process and that there's always a way to keep moving forward.
My pleasure, Matt. I hope everyone listening remembers that they have the power to build a life of positive habits, one small step at a time. Setbacks are part of the journey, but as long as you're willing to keep learning and keep trying, you'll get there. Remember, it's about progress, not perfection.
Jim, so far we've covered the importance of positive habits, how to build them, and even strategies for handling setbacks. But there's something about habits that I think a lot of people overlook, and that's the long-term impact of those small daily actions. I've heard you mention something called the compounding effect when it comes to habits. Can you explain what that means and why it's so powerful?
Matt, you've hit on one of the most fascinating and powerful principles in personal development. The compounding effect, sometimes called the law of accumulation, is the idea that small, positive actions done consistently over time don't just add up, they multiply in their impact. Think of it like interest in a bank account. When you make small deposits every day, over time, those deposits begin to earn interest. And as you keep adding to them, the interest compounds, creating exponential growth. That's the magic of consistent effort. And it's the same with habits. One of my favorite examples of this is physical fitness. Let's say someone commits to walking 10,000 steps a day. Now, on any single day, those steps might not make a huge difference. But over the course of a year, that's 3.65 million steps. That's the equivalent of walking across several states. This massive distance isn't accomplished by one big leap, but by the accumulation of small, consistent steps. And the same principle applies to our habits, whether it's reading, saving money, or building a skill. Over time, those small actions create monumental changes.
That's such a great example, Jim. I think people often feel that if they don't see results immediately, their efforts aren't worthwhile. But what you're saying is that every small action matters, even if we don't see the impact right away.
Exactly, Matt. Most people underestimate the power of small daily actions because they don't see immediate results. But the compounding effect takes time. It's subtle at first, almost invisible. It's only after days, weeks, months, sometimes even years that you start to see the massive impact. Think of it this way: if you improved yourself by just 1% each day, you wouldn't be twice as good in a year. No, you'd actually be 37 times better. That's the magic of compounding. When we're consistent with positive habits, each small action builds on the one before, creating a snowball effect that gains momentum over time. And eventually, you reach a point where the results are undeniable.
That's incredible, Jim. I think people get caught up in the idea that they need to make massive changes to see results, but you're showing us that it's the small, consistent actions that truly make the difference. Could you share another example of the compounding effect that might be relatable for our listeners?
Of course, Matt. Let's take something as simple as reading. Imagine someone makes a commitment to read just 10 pages a day. Now, 10 pages might not sound like much. It's something most people could do in 15 minutes or so. But over a year, that adds up to 3,650 pages, which is roughly the equivalent of 12 books. Now, think about the knowledge and insights they'd gained from reading 12 personal development or business books in a year. They would have completely transformed their mindset, gained new ideas, and likely developed a deeper understanding of their field or passion. Again, this wasn't done through marathon reading sessions, but through small, consistent actions compounded over time. That's the true power of positive habits. They allow us to make profound changes without feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the task.
That's fantastic, Jim. It really highlights how the compounding effect can apply to any area of life, doesn't it? Whether it's health, learning, finances, it's like a universal principle.
Absolutely, Matt. The compounding effect applies universally. Take finances, for instance. If someone started saving just $5 a day at the end of the month, they'd have about $150. Now, that might not seem like a huge amount, but let's look at it over a few years. With consistent saving, interest, and maybe a few small increases to their contributions, that initial $5 a day could turn into thousands of dollars over time. And all it took was a simple, consistent commitment.
It's amazing, Jim. I think many people have a hard time visualizing how small actions can add up in such a big way. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start leveraging the compounding effect but feels unsure about where to begin?
My advice would be to start small and focus on consistency. Choose one area of your life you want to improve and identify a small daily action you can take to move in that direction. It doesn't have to be grand or impressive, it just has to be something you can commit to doing every day. Let's say someone wants to improve their health. Instead of aiming for a complete overhaul of their diet and exercise routine, they could start with 1 glass of water in the morning or a 10-minute walk. These are manageable steps, and as they repeat them day after day, they'll build the confidence and motivation to add more positive habits to their routine. Remember, the key is consistency. The more you show up, the more momentum you build.
That's powerful advice, Jim. Starting small and focusing on the long-term impact of those actions takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
Exactly, Matt. Too often we get discouraged because we set our sights too high and expect immediate results. But life doesn't work that way. Growth is gradual. Success is cumulative. And the beautiful thing about positive habits is that once they're established, they often require less effort to maintain. They become part of who we are. There's a saying I love: success is the sum of small efforts, repeated day in and day out. Every little effort counts, even if it seems insignificant at the time, because eventually those small efforts compound into something extraordinary. It's about making deposits in the bank of life every day, even when you don't see the balance grow right away.
Jim, I think this idea of making deposits in the bank of life is something people can really take to heart. It's like you're planting seeds with every positive habit, and over time you get to enjoy the fruits of that labor.
That's a perfect way to put it, Matt. You're absolutely right. Each positive habit is a seed we plant, and with patience we eventually reap the rewards. And this brings us back to the importance of intentionality. We have to choose the habits we want to cultivate carefully because, remember, the compounding effect works both ways. Negative habits compound as well. If someone makes a habit of overspending, procrastinating, or neglecting their health, those small choices will accumulate, leading to outcomes they might not want. But when we're intentional about building positive habits, we're setting ourselves up for a future of growth and fulfillment. We may not always see it in the moment, but over time we'll look back and realize how far we've come because of those daily choices.
Jim, thank you for breaking this down so clearly. I think the idea of planting seeds and watching them grow is something everyone can relate to. Do you have any final thoughts on the compounding effect before we move on?
Yes, Matt, just one final thought. I want everyone listening to understand that they don't have to see the entire journey to start walking down the path. Sometimes the progress is so slow that we feel like nothing's happening. But if we keep going, keep building those positive habits, there will come a day when we look back and realize how much we've achieved. Remember, the compounding effect is a quiet process, but it's also a powerful one. Trust it. Believe in the power of your actions, however small they may seem today. Because when you build a life based on positive habits, the results will speak for themselves over time. Success isn't always loud or flashy. It's often the result of quiet, persistent effort. And that's the compounding effect at work.
Thank you, Jim. That's an incredible insight, and I think it's a message everyone listening can benefit from. The compounding effect is truly powerful, and your examples really make it clear how impactful those small daily actions can be. Let's keep that in mind as we move forward, because the idea of consistent effort will tie into the next part of our discussion perfectly. Jim, we've spent a lot of time discussing the power of positive habits, but I think a big part of building those positive routines is being able to recognize and transform the negative ones. A lot of us have habits that hold us back, and breaking them isn't always easy. Could you share some thoughts on how to go about transforming those negative habits into positive ones?
Absolutely, Matt. You know, it's true that before we can build a solid foundation of positive habits, we need to acknowledge and deal with the negative ones. This can be challenging, but the good news is that every negative habit has an opportunity for transformation. Let's start with a simple principle I always teach: awareness is the first step. Many times, people go through their day engaging in habits they're not even fully conscious of: grabbing the phone the first thing in the morning, mindlessly scrolling through social media, reaching for snacks when stressed, or procrastinating on important tasks. Often, these habits become so ingrained that they're automatic. So, to break free from them, the first thing we need is awareness. And by that I mean real, honest self-reflection. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. So take some time to examine your day and identify the habits that aren't serving you.
That's a great point, Jim. So often we're on autopilot and don't even realize what we're doing. But once someone becomes aware of a negative habit, what's the next step? How do they begin the process of replacing it?
Once you've identified a habit that's holding you back, the next step is to really understand the why behind it. Every habit, whether positive or negative, is fulfilling a need or providing some form of reward. That reward could be comfort, distraction, or even a sense of control. So, when you understand what's driving the habit, you can start to work on replacing it with something that serves you better. For instance, let's say someone has a habit of procrastinating. They might find themselves delaying important tasks and turning to easier, less meaningful activities. Why? Maybe it's a way of avoiding stress or fear of failure. In that case, the need being fulfilled isn't the act of procrastination itself, but the temporary relief it brings. So, to replace that habit, they could develop a new strategy to address the underlying issue, like learning stress management techniques or breaking tasks into smaller, manageable steps. The goal is to replace the habit with something constructive that meets the same need.
That makes a lot of sense, Jim. So rather than just trying to stop the negative habit cold, it's about finding an alternative that addresses the same need. What are some other strategies that people can use to turn these negative habits around?
Absolutely, Matt. Let's talk about a few practical strategies. One powerful approach is to apply what I call habit stacking. This is where you attach a new, positive habit to an already established one. Someone, for example, has the habit of reaching for their phone first thing in the morning. They could stack a new habit on top of it, like taking a few moments to express gratitude or setting an intention for the day before they start scrolling. By attaching the new behavior to an existing one, you create a structure that's easier to follow. Another important strategy is to make the negative habit harder to engage in and the positive one easier. For instance, if someone has the habit of snacking on unhealthy food late at night, they could start by making those foods less accessible. Maybe they store them out of sight or replace them with healthier options. Then, they make the positive alternative more accessible. It's amazing how a simple change in our environment can steer our behavior in the right direction.
Those are fantastic tips, Jim. So it's not just about willpower, it's also about setting up the environment to support the change. I can see how that would be really helpful. But what about when someone slips up? How do they get back on track if they fall back into that negative habit?
That's a critical point, Matt. Because setbacks happen. We're human. And sometimes we'll fall back into old patterns. But the key is not to let one slip turn into a downward spiral. I like to remind people that progress, not perfection, is the goal. If you make a mistake, learn from it, forgive yourself, and get back on track. One technique that can be useful here is the 2-day rule. This means that you don't allow yourself to skip a positive habit 2 days in a row. So, if someone misses a workout or forgets to journal one day, they make it a point to get back on it the next day. This rule keeps momentum going and helps prevent one misstep from becoming a permanent setback.
I love that, Jim, the 2-day rule. It's practical and keeps things from feeling overwhelming. What about the role of discipline? You talk about that a lot in your work. How does discipline come into play when transforming these negative habits?
Discipline, Matt, is the backbone of any lasting change. Without discipline, even the best strategies and intentions can fall flat. Discipline is what keeps us going, especially on those days when motivation is low. Think of discipline as the muscle we build by sticking to our commitments. The more we practice it, the stronger it gets. When we apply discipline to replace negative habits with positive ones, we're training ourselves to follow through on our intentions, even when it's challenging. And over time, as we strengthen that muscle, we start to rely on discipline less and less because our new habits have become part of who we are. But make no mistake, discipline is what gets us through that initial, often uncomfortable phase of change.
Discipline is a muscle. What a powerful metaphor, Jim. So to bring this all together, if someone is serious about transforming a negative habit, what would you say are the key actions they should take?
Well, Matt, let's summarize the key steps to make it actionable. First, we start with awareness. Identify the negative habit and be honest about its impact on your life. Then, look for the underlying need that habit is fulfilling. Once you understand that, find a positive habit that can meet that same need in a healthier, more productive way. Next, use habit stacking to help you establish the new behavior and adjust your environment to make the positive habit easier and the negative one harder. And remember to apply the 2-day rule so that if you do slip up, you get back on track quickly. Finally, commit to practicing discipline daily. It's what keeps everything else in place. When we take these actions consistently, transformation is inevitable. We begin to see that change isn't as daunting as it seems because it's not about a massive overhaul, it's about small, intentional steps in the right direction.
Jim, thank you for that summary. I think a lot of people feel inspired to tackle their negative habits after hearing those steps. What you're saying is that transformation is within reach for everyone if they're willing to commit to small, consistent actions and approach change with awareness and discipline. Is that right?
Exactly, Matt. Change isn't about reinventing ourselves overnight. It's about consciously choosing to be a little better each day. When we replace even one negative habit with a positive one, we create a ripple effect that can transform our entire life. And remember, we all have the power to choose. Every habit we form, every action we take is a choice. So choose wisely.
Powerful words, Jim. And I think this idea of choice is a perfect note to end on for this segment. We can all start today, right now, to make better choices and steer our lives in the direction we want. Thank you, Jim, for these incredible insights.
It's been a pleasure, Matt. Remember, change is possible for anyone who's willing to take the first step. And that first step can start right now.
Jim, I know that one of the things that has always struck me about your teaching is how you bring these principles to life with real stories. It's one thing to talk about habits and change as concepts, but when we hear about actual people who transform their lives, it becomes so much more powerful. Could you share some of those stories with us? Stories of individuals who truly made a breakthrough by building positive habits.
Absolutely, Matt. Stories are a wonderful way to demonstrate that all these ideas we're discussing aren't just theories, they're real and they work. So let me tell you about a few individuals who not only embraced the power of habits, but transformed their entire lives by doing so. One story that stands out is of a man I met in my early career, a fellow named Tom. Tom was, at the time, working as a janitor, and he struggled financially. He came from a tough background, never really had much of a support system, and he had a lot of self-doubt. But Tom also had one essential quality, a desire to improve. That desire, even in the smallest amount, can be a game changer. He was tired of feeling stuck, tired of barely making it from one day to the next. One evening, he approached me after a seminar and asked, "Jim, how do I start changing my life?" Now, I could see that he was expecting some grand answer, but I told him something very simple: start by reading 10 pages of a good book every day that was at minus 10 pages. It sounded so small, so manageable, that Tom agreed without hesitation. He began reading daily. It was a habit that didn't seem big or overwhelming, but it was consistent. Every day, 10 pages. He read books on success, financial management, self-discipline, and philosophy. And Matt, something incredible happened. Within a few months, his mindset began to shift. He started thinking differently, making small, positive changes in other areas of his life as well.
That's amazing, Jim. It's like that small habit of reading planted a seed, and as he kept nurturing it, he saw it grow in ways he couldn't have imagined.
Exactly, Matt. That's the beauty of starting small. That little habit of reading led him to develop other habits. He began waking up earlier to exercise and plan his day. He began saving a portion of his income at first, just a few dollars each week. He even worked on his communication skills because he felt more confident and knowledgeable. Over time, Tom went from being a janitor to managing a team of his own. And then years later, he actually started his own small business. It was the power of positive habits in action. Each small step was building upon the last, creating a strong foundation that led him to success.
That's an incredible transformation, Jim, and it all started with just reading 10 pages a day. It's amazing how one small habit can have that kind of ripple effect. Do you have any other stories like that?
Oh, absolutely, Matt. Another story that I often share is about a woman named Sarah. Now, Sarah was a young professional struggling with self-doubt. She had a hard time speaking up in meetings, felt overlooked, and often questioned her own abilities. She attended one of my seminars with a friend, and like Tom, she came up to me afterward. She asked me, "Jim, how can I become more confident? How can I stop feeling like an imposter?" Now, there are many answers to that question, but one piece of advice I gave her was to start with a morning routine. I told her, commit to a morning ritual that sets you up for success every day. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Maybe it's just a few minutes of quiet reflection, some gratitude, and setting an intention for the day. But make it a habit. Sarah took that advice to heart. Every morning, she'd wake up 15 minutes earlier to go through her ritual. She'd list things she was grateful for, remind herself of her goals, and visualize herself succeeding at work. Little by little, this habit began to shift her mindset. Her confidence grew because she was starting each day with a positive frame of mind. Over time, Sarah began speaking up more in meetings, sharing her ideas, and even leading projects. Within a year, she was promoted to a managerial position, and she later told me that it all began with that one small change.
Wow, Jim, that's so inspiring. I think a lot of people can relate to Sarah's struggle with self-doubt. And it's powerful to see how something as simple as a morning ritual helped her gain confidence and take control of her career. Do you find that starting the day with positive habits really sets the tone for success?
Absolutely, Matt. I believe the way we start our day is incredibly important. It's like setting the compass for where you're headed. If you start with a strong, positive mindset, it has a powerful impact on everything you do. And this morning ritual doesn't have to be complicated. Like Sarah showed us, it can be as simple as taking a few minutes to ground yourself, practice gratitude, and focus on your goals. But when you make it a habit, it builds momentum. It gives you confidence, focus, and a sense of purpose. And that brings me to another story. This one is about a young man named Mike. Mike was working in sales, and he was struggling with consistency. He'd have a great month, then a slow month. He was up and down, and it was driving him crazy. So I told Mike to create a habit of daily reflection. Every evening, he'd write down what went well, what he learned, and what he could improve. Just a few lines each night, but he did it every single day. Over time, this simple habit gave him incredible insights into his strengths and weaknesses. He could see patterns and learn from his own experiences, and he used this knowledge to improve his performance. Eventually, Mike became one of the top salespeople in his company, all because he took a few minutes each day to reflect.
That's amazing, Jim. It's like each of these people took a small, manageable habit and made it a cornerstone of their personal growth. And what's striking to me is that none of these habits are overly complex or time-consuming. They're accessible to anyone.
You're absolutely right, Matt. And that's the point I try to drive home with these stories. Transformation doesn't require massive, drastic changes overnight. It requires consistent, positive habits that we commit to every day. And the wonderful thing is that these habits are available to all of us. Whether it's reading, setting intentions, reflecting, or saving money, these are things anyone can do. It's about the discipline to stick with them day after day, even when the results aren't immediately visible.
And it sounds like these habits also give people a sense of control, Jim, like they're taking the reins of their life one step at a time. And I think that's a big motivator for many of us to feel like we're steering our own ship, so to speak.
Exactly, Matt. Positive habits give us that control. They help us become proactive rather than reactive. When you commit to a habit, no matter how small, you're making a statement. You're saying, I'm in charge of my growth, my success, my happiness. That's incredibly empowering. And the more we reinforce this, the more it becomes part of our identity. That's the magic of habits. They shape who we are. And over time, they create a life that reflects those choices.
Jim, these stories have been eye-opening. I think they're exactly what many people need to hear, that positive change is possible for anyone who's willing to start small and stay consistent. It's inspiring to see how simple habits can truly transform lives.
It's been a pleasure sharing them, Matt. I always say success is a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment repeated over time. If you can embrace this concept and commit to those daily disciplines, you'll be amazed at where you'll find yourself.
Jim, we've covered a lot about positive habits and their impact, but I know that many people struggle with structuring their day in a way that keeps them on track. Let's get into the nitty-gritty here. Could you give us some practical tips for building daily routines that set the stage for success?
Absolutely, Matt. Building a daily routine is one of the best ways to ensure that your positive habits actually stick. It's not about packing every moment with tasks, but about creating a rhythm that works for you, something that you can realistically commit to each day. I like to think of routines as the framework that keeps us moving forward, even on the days when motivation might be low.
I love that perspective. So, where should someone start? Is there a specific time of day you think is most important?
I always recommend starting with a strong morning routine. The way we begin our day can set the tone for everything that follows. A morning routine doesn't need to be elaborate, but it should be consistent and intentional. I usually suggest 3 foundational elements: gratitude, planning, and physical movement. These 3 simple actions can make a world of difference.
Gratitude, planning, and movement. That's a powerful combination, Jim. Could you break down each of these a little more? Let's start with gratitude.
Of course. Gratitude is a powerful mindset tool. When you begin your day with gratitude, you're setting a positive tone and reminding yourself of what's going well. It's easy to get caught up in what's lacking or what needs fixing, but when we pause to reflect on what we're thankful for, it shifts our focus to abundance. I recommend starting with as little as 1 or 2 things you're grateful for, something as simple as having a roof over your head or the people in your life. This habit helps you approach the day with a positive outlook.
That's such a great point, Jim. Gratitude can be a game changer. What about the planning aspect?
Planning your day is essential. It doesn't have to be a complex schedule, but taking just a few minutes to outline your top priorities can give your day structure. I usually tell people to identify their big 3 tasks for the day, the 3 things that, if accomplished, will make the day a success. This gives you a clear sense of direction and helps you avoid getting overwhelmed by a long list of to-dos.
The big 3? I like that, Jim. It's focused and achievable. And finally, let's talk about movement. How does that fit into the morning routine?
Movement is key, Matt. Physical activity doesn't just benefit the body, it energizes the mind. Now, I'm not saying you need to run a marathon every morning. It can be something as simple as stretching, going for a walk, or even a short workout. Just moving your body can boost your energy and clarity. A little exercise can improve your mood, sharpen your focus, and set you up to tackle the day with more enthusiasm.
That makes so much sense. A morning routine with gratitude, planning, and movement sounds like a powerful start to the day. What about the evening? How can we end our day in a way that sets us up for success?
Ending the day is just as important as starting it. In the evening, I recommend a few minutes of reflection. Think of it as a mini review of your day. Take a moment to ask yourself what went well, what you learned, and where you might improve. This reflection doesn't need to be a long, drawn-out process. It can be as simple as jotting down a few thoughts in a notebook. This habit helps you learn from each day and make small adjustments for the next one.
Reflection, got it. I think a lot of us rush through our days without ever really looking back. What else would you add to an evening routine?
I also recommend winding down with gratitude again. Just like in the morning, take a moment to reflect on something good that happened during the day, no matter how small. It helps you end on a positive note. And finally, consider a bit of preparation for the next day. This can be as simple as reviewing your big 3 tasks for the following day or laying out anything you'll need in the morning. A little preparation in the evening helps you start the next day with momentum.
Jim, these ideas are so practical. Morning gratitude, planning, and movement to start strong, then ending with reflection, gratitude, and a bit of prep work. Do you have any tips on keeping this kind of routine consistent?
Consistency is key, Matt. Start small and manageable. Don't try to build a routine that takes hours. That's a quick way to burn out. Begin with just a few minutes for each part of your routine and add more as it feels comfortable. Remember, a few minutes of quality focus each day is better than trying to cram too much in. Build the habit slowly and intentionally.
Start small. That's a solid piece of advice, Jim. And I think it's encouraging for people who might feel overwhelmed by the idea of creating a daily routine. Any other final tips on structuring a day?
Yes, there's one more thing I'd like to emphasize. Keep it flexible. Life isn't always going to stick to your plan, and that's okay. Allow some room in your routine for adjustments. The goal is to create a structure that supports you, not something that becomes a rigid schedule. So, be kind to yourself if you miss a day or if things don't go perfectly. Just get back to it the next day.
That's such a good reminder, Jim. I think a lot of people might feel discouraged if they miss a day and let that derail their progress.
Exactly, Matt. Progress, not perfection. Remember, routines are a way to support your goals and growth. Missing a day here and there isn't a failure, it's an opportunity to reinforce your commitment. Think of it as a long-term journey. Each small, consistent step you take helps you build a foundation of habits that will carry you through the ups and downs.
This has been so practical, Jim. I think anyone watching can take these steps and start implementing them right away. It's inspiring to see how creating these routines can become a foundation for success.
Thank you, Matt. It's all about being intentional and consistent, even with the small things. These routines may seem simple, but they have the power to create big changes over time. I encourage everyone listening to give it a try and see what unfolds. Start with gratitude, create a plan. Move your body, reflect on your progress, and end each day on a positive note. Success, after all, is built one day at a time.
Jim, I think it's clear that positive habits can transform us as individuals. But let's go a step further here. What about the ripple effect? How do these habits extend into other areas like our relationships, our careers, and even our sense of personal fulfillment?
Matt, that's a wonderful question. One of the most powerful things about habits is that they're not confined to just one area of our lives. When we develop positive habits, they naturally spill over into our interactions, our work, and even our influence on others. I like to think of habits as pebbles dropped in a pond. Every habit we cultivate creates ripples that extend out, touching every aspect of who we are and what we do.
That's such a vivid image, Jim. So you're saying that a seemingly small habit like focusing on gratitude each morning can affect our relationships or career in ways we might not immediately see?
Exactly. Let's take gratitude as an example. When you begin your day with gratitude, you're choosing to focus on abundance, on what's right in your life. This creates a positive mindset, which in turn affects how you interact with others. People are naturally drawn to those who are grateful and appreciative. If you're starting each day in that state of mind, you're more likely to be patient, empathetic, and present with the people around you. Over time, this improves the quality of your relationships, both personal and professional.
That's so true. I can see how gratitude could influence how you show up for your team or even with family. It sounds like these positive habits make us better versions of ourselves, which then impacts everyone around us.
Yes, Matt, and it doesn't stop there. Take consistency, for example. When you practice consistency, you're not only building a habit, but you're also establishing a reputation. People in your life, whether they're friends, family, or colleagues, begin to see you as someone who is reliable, someone who follows through. This builds trust, which is foundational to any strong relationship or successful career.
Trust, absolutely. I think that's a quality we often overlook in habits. It's like every time we follow through on our commitments, we're making small deposits into the trust accounts of those around us.
Exactly right, Matt. Trust is invaluable. And here's where the ripple effect becomes truly remarkable. When you become a person who embodies positive habits, trustworthiness, gratitude, patience, focus, you influence those around you to do the same. Think about it. If you consistently bring a positive attitude, your team, your family, your friends, everyone begins to mirror that energy. In this way, you're leading by example simply by committing to your own growth.
So in a sense, our positive habits don't just change our lives, they become a form of leadership.
Absolutely, Matt. Leadership isn't always about a title, it's about influence. And what's the most powerful form of influence? Leading by example. When you embody positive habits, you show others what's possible. They see your growth, your resilience, and they become inspired to make changes in their own lives. This ripple effect isn't limited to personal circles, it extends to the workplace, the community, and beyond.
I love that idea, Jim. It sounds like the ultimate fulfillment, knowing that you're having a positive impact on others simply by being consistent in your own life.
It truly is. And here's the beautiful thing, Matt, as you create these ripples, they come back to you in ways you might not expect. When you invest in your habits, those around you become inspired and often want to support or collaborate with you. In a career setting, this could lead to new opportunities, partnerships, or even promotions. In relationships, it brings a sense of mutual respect and admiration. People feel valued and they naturally want to reciprocate that positivity.
It's like creating a cycle of growth where everyone involved benefits.
Exactly. And this cycle fosters long-term fulfillment. Positive habits lead to steady growth, which brings a sense of accomplishment and purpose. When we see the positive effects of our habits, when we notice how they improve our relationships, enhance our careers, and make us feel more connected and fulfilled, there's a deep sense of satisfaction. This isn't fleeting happiness, it's a sustainable, lasting joy that comes from knowing you're making a meaningful impact on yourself and those around you.
That's so powerful, Jim. It's not just about self-improvement, it's about creating a legacy in a way. When our habits become part of who we are, we leave a mark on those around us that can last beyond our lifetime.
Well said, Matt. Positive habits do become part of our legacy. Long after we're gone, the impact of our actions, the trust we've built, and the influence we've had on others can live on. That's why it's so essential to choose our habits carefully. They shape not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us, often in ways we may never fully realize.
Jim, this idea of the ripple effect is inspiring. It really emphasizes the importance of being intentional with our habits. What would you say to someone who feels that their habits aren't important or that no one else will notice?
I would remind them that our habits shape our character, and character is what others notice most. People may not always see the small actions you take every day, but they will see the person you become because of those actions. And that, Matt, is the essence of influence. So even if you don't think anyone is watching, you're developing traits and qualities that impact how others perceive and trust you.
Such a great reminder. We might not see the immediate impact of a single habit, but over time, it's like we're planting seeds in every area of our lives. And those seeds grow often beyond what we could have imagined.
Precisely. It's about sowing seeds today for a harvest in the future. Remember, Matt, habits are like that. They're small seeds planted each day. The harvest comes in the form of improved relationships, career opportunities, and personal fulfillment. So don't underestimate the power of a single habit. Each small, positive action compounds over time, creating a legacy of growth and positivity.
Jim, this has been incredible. The idea that our daily habits not only build success, but also strengthen our relationships and leave a lasting impact is something everyone can benefit from hearing. Thank you for sharing these insights.
It's been a pleasure, Matt. Remember, each habit is a choice, a chance to create ripples that reach far beyond ourselves. So I encourage everyone watching or listening today, take that first step. Begin with one habit. Build a foundation of consistency and watch as those ripples transform not only your life, but the lives of those around you.
Jim, everything we've discussed has been incredibly enlightening, especially this idea of the ripple effect. It got me thinking about something even bigger: legacy. a lot of people are interested in leaving a mark, something that goes beyond just day-to-day success. Can you talk a bit about how positive habits contribute to building a legacy?
Absolutely, Matt. Legacy is such an important topic, and it's something we don't often think about until later in life. But the truth is, our legacy is being built every day through our actions, our words, and most importantly, our habits. It's not something we leave behind. It's something we create with every choice we make. When we build positive habits, we're not just investing in ourselves, but in everyone who crosses our path.
So, in a way, legacy starts long before we think it does.
Exactly. Legacy isn't the result of a single big accomplishment or moment. It's the cumulative effect of small, consistent actions taken over time. Think of it like planting seeds. When we plant seeds of discipline, gratitude, kindness, and integrity, we're creating a garden that others can enjoy. Even when we're not around to tend it, each positive habit we develop, whether it's maintaining a strong work ethic, being compassionate to others, or staying committed to personal growth, these habits create a foundation that others can look to and learn from.
That's such a beautiful way to look at it. So, in your experience, what does it take to build this kind of legacy? How can someone be intentional about creating a positive, lasting impact?
It starts with a choice, Matt. A choice to live with purpose and intention, and to align our actions with our values. I always say that legacy is built on character, and character is built on habits. To leave a legacy of positivity, we must commit to habits that reflect who we truly want to be. This means making the decision to grow every day, to contribute something meaningful, and to build others up along the way.
That's powerful, Jim. I think many people feel that legacy is out of their hands, something that's only recognized after they're gone. But you're saying it's a deliberate act we can work on right now.
Absolutely. In fact, if we wait until later to start thinking about legacy, we miss out on all the ways we can shape it now. For example, let's talk about discipline. Discipline is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves, but it's also one of the most impactful habits we can pass on to others. When you live a disciplined life, people notice. They see that you're serious about your goals, that you keep your commitments, and that you show up consistently. This inspires them to do the same. And the beauty of this is that the discipline you practice becomes part of your legacy, something that influences others, even after you're gone.
That makes sense. And I imagine it applies to all sorts of habits: gratitude, resilience, kindness.
Exactly, Matt. When we make gratitude a daily practice, we're not just enriching our own lives, we're showing others the power of appreciation. When we're resilient, we're demonstrating that challenges are not stop signs, but stepping stones. And when we choose kindness, we're creating a legacy of compassion that can have a ripple effect for generations. These habits don't just stay with us, they're passed on through every person we touch. Legacy is about creating something that endures, and habits are one of the most powerful ways to do that.
Jim, you've had an incredible career and your influence has reached millions. What habits do you feel have been most important in building your legacy? And what advice would you give to someone who's just starting on this journey?
Great question, Matt. For me, a few core habits have shaped my legacy. First and foremost, the habit of continuous learning. I made a commitment early on to always be a student, to never stop growing. This habit has kept me curious, adaptable, and open-minded. It's allowed me to stay connected with people from all walks of life and to keep my ideas fresh and relevant. If there's one piece of advice I can give to anyone just starting out, it's to commit to lifelong learning. Knowledge builds confidence, and confidence builds influence.
Lifelong learning, I can see how that has such a profound impact, especially over time. What else?
Another critical habit is consistency. There's a saying, I love success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. Consistency doesn't mean perfection, it means showing up, even when it's hard. By being consistent in your efforts, you build trust with others. People know they can count on you, that your word is your bond. This is especially important when it comes to legacy. Consistency is what solidifies the impact of your habits. It's not about doing something extraordinary once. It's about doing something meaningful regularly.
Consistency seems so simple, yet it's one of the hardest things for many people. How do you stay consistent when life gets in the way?
It's a challenge, no doubt. But one thing I've learned is that motivation is fleeting, discipline is what keeps you going. Consistency requires a strong why. You need a purpose that's bigger than any obstacle. For me, it's the understanding that every action I take today contributes to the legacy I leave tomorrow. That perspective keeps me focused, even on tough days.
And that discipline has helped you create a lasting impact. Jim, as we wrap up, what final thoughts would you share with those who want to leave their own legacy of positive habits?
I'd say this: remember that your legacy isn't something you leave, it's something you live. Start today. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the right circumstances. Begin by choosing one positive habit that aligns with your values and commit to it. Over time, add others. Think about who you want to be, not just for yourself, but for those around you and for future generations. Every choice, every action, every habit, it all adds up. The more intentional you are, the more meaningful your legacy will be.
Jim, this conversation has been nothing short of inspiring. Thank you for reminding us that the journey to a legacy starts right here with our habits today. You've given us so much to think about and so many practical steps to begin building a legacy of positivity, growth, and discipline.
It's been a pleasure, Matt. Remember, legacy is a daily decision. Make each day count, and your legacy will reflect the very best of who you are.
Well, Jim, I have to say, this has been one of the most enlightening and inspiring conversations I've had in a long time. We've covered so much ground, from the foundation of positive habits to building a legacy that lasts. Every topic we discussed carried such powerful insights. And I'm sure our audience is just as moved and motivated as I am.
For those watching, let's take a quick recap. Jim walked us through what positive habits truly are and why they're essential not just for short-term gains, but for a life of purpose and fulfillment. He highlighted how small, consistent actions compound over time, creating a momentum that shapes our lives and even the lives of those around us.
And Jim, I know I'm not alone in saying that the framework you shared for building habits, starting small, staying consistent, tracking progress, and shaping your environment, those are such practical steps that anyone can apply. It's not about perfection, it's about progress, one day at a time.
Thank you, Matt. I'm truly grateful for this opportunity to share these ideas. If there's one thing I'd want people to take away, it's that the power of habits is in their simplicity and consistency. Positive habits aren't reserved for the successful or the privileged. They're for everyone willing to make small, daily commitments to becoming better versions of themselves.
That's such a reassuring thought, Jim. The idea that anyone can start today, no matter where they are, and begin creating a foundation for their future. You've also given us a deeper understanding of how positive habits aren't just personal, they have a ripple effect. They impact our relationships, our work, and ultimately the legacy we leave behind.
Exactly. Legacy is something we often think of as a big, distant goal, but it's really the outcome of the small, intentional actions we take each day. Whether it's through kindness, discipline, gratitude, or resilience, our habits shape who we are and what we give to others. And over time, those habits form a story that outlives us, a story of character, values, and inspiration for those who come after us.
Beautifully said, Jim. As we come to the end of our conversation, what final words of wisdom would you like to leave our audience with?
My advice is simple, Matt. Start small, but start today. Find one positive habit you can commit to and let that become a part of who you are. Don't worry about perfection, consistency is what matters. As you grow, add more habits, refine them, and keep building. Over time, you'll be amazed at the transformation. Life will test you, but remember, every challenge is an opportunity to grow, and the habits you build will guide you through those challenges. Success, fulfillment, and even your legacy, these aren't things that happen by chance. They're the result of choices made every single day. And those choices become easier when we rely on habits that support our values and our purpose. So start with one small action, stay with it, and let it lead you. Because the life you want, the influence you wish to have, it's all within reach when you make habits your allies.
Thank you, Jim, for such powerful insights, and more importantly, for reminding us that positive change is within our control. For those watching, Jim's words are a call to action. Choose one habit, commit to it, and let it take you on a journey of growth and purpose. Let's make our daily choices count, and like Jim said, let's build a legacy worth remembering. Thank you again, Jim, for sharing your time, your wisdom, and your passion with us today. It's been an honor, and I know that your words will resonate with us long after this conversation.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure being here and sharing this message. I hope everyone listening feels empowered to start creating their own path through positive habits.